Pause for a moment, not because someone asked you to, but because something has quietly found its way to you at exactly the moment it was meant to. Out of every voice you could have heard today, out of every message you could have opened, this is the one now resting before your eyes. That is not an accident inside this story. There is a reason your heart felt just a little different before you arrived here. Perhaps you could not explain it. Perhaps you tried to ignore it. Yet something deeper than logic whispered that there was still one truth waiting for you, one truth that refused to disappear no matter how many days had passed. Do not hurry away. Some messages are spoken. Some are written. And some are erased before anyone else ever sees them. But heaven remembers every word. There is someone whose heart has been carrying your name far longer than they have allowed themselves to admit. They believed silence would protect them. They believed distance would help them forget. They convinced themselves that deleting their thoughts would somehow erase the feelings that inspired them. Yet feelings written from the deepest place inside a soul cannot truly disappear. What is hidden from human eyes is never hidden from heaven. Tonight, I invite you into a story where what was deleted was never truly lost. Before this moment continues, let your heart become still. Do not search for answers too quickly. Sometimes the greatest revelations arrive softly, one heartbeat at a time, until suddenly everything that once seemed confusing begins fitting together like pieces that were always meant to meet. Long before you pressed play, a quiet struggle had already begun. Not in your hands. Not in your home. But inside the heart of someone who has spent countless nights arguing with themselves. They have replayed conversations that never happened. Imagined words they wished they had spoken. Written messages they never believed they were brave enough to send. Each time courage arrived, fear arrived first. Each time hope whispered, doubt spoke louder. Yet even doubt cannot silence what love continues writing inside the human spirit. Perhaps you have wondered why certain memories return without invitation. Why familiar names suddenly appear inside ordinary moments. Why songs feel different. Why certain evenings seem unusually quiet, as though the world itself is holding its breath. In this story, those moments are not meaningless. They are part of a much larger picture that has been unfolding beyond ordinary sight. You may think this is simply about two people. It is not. It is about timing. It is about healing. It is about the hidden space between what someone feels and what they finally become brave enough to reveal. There comes a moment when every heart reaches a crossroads. One road leads toward silence. The other toward honesty. Both require courage. But only one changes everything. The person connected to this story stood at that crossroads more than once. They walked away. Returned. Walked away again. Not because they stopped caring. Because caring frightened them more than pretending not to. There are battles that never make a sound. The loudest storms often happen behind peaceful faces. While the world continued moving around them, they carried conversations no one else could hear. Should I send it? Should I wait? Will they understand? What if it changes everything? What if it changes nothing? Question after question circled their mind until the sunrise arrived without answers. Yet something remarkable happened. The message was finally written. Not carelessly. Not impulsively. Every sentence was rewritten. Every word examined. Every pause filled with emotion too deep to explain. It was never intended to impress. It was simply honest. Perhaps for the first time in a very long while. There are moments when honesty feels heavier than any burden. This was one of those moments. As their fingers rested above the screen, time itself seemed slower. They stared at your name. Not once. Not twice. Again. And again. As though seeing those few letters awakened memories they had tried to bury beneath ordinary life. Memories have strange ways of surviving. They wait quietly until one small reminder opens every forgotten door. That night, every door opened. Laughter they remembered. Conversations unfinished. Dreams never spoken aloud. The possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, the story between two hearts had never truly ended. Hope can be surprisingly persistent. Even after disappointment. Even after silence. Even after months of convincing yourself that moving on would be easier. Hope waits. Patiently. Almost invisibly. Until one unexpected moment brings it back to life. That was happening now. As they looked at the glowing screen before them, the room seemed strangely quiet. No distractions. No voices. Only a decision that felt far larger than a simple message. Because this was never merely about words. It was about vulnerability. About removing every mask. About allowing another person to see what had remained hidden for far too long. Few people realize how much courage honesty truly requires. Many can speak. Very few can reveal their hearts. This message was becoming exactly that. A doorway. Not only toward another person, but toward the version of themselves they had been afraid to become. If only the story ended there. But heaven often reveals its deepest lessons in the moments people least expect. Just as their thumb moved closer to the send button, everything changed. Not outside. Inside. A single memory returned with astonishing clarity. A sentence once spoken. A disappointment never healed. A fear they believed had disappeared. Suddenly confidence began slipping away. The message remained on the screen. Complete. Waiting. Breathing with possibility. Yet fear whispered familiar words. What if they no longer care? What if this is too late? What if silence is safer? Fear rarely invents new arguments. It simply repeats old ones until they sound believable. And for one painful moment, they believed them. Their breathing slowed. Their eyes filled with uncertainty. Hope stepped backward. Silence stepped forward. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of pressing send, their finger hovered above another choice. A choice made every day by people who convince themselves that protecting their hearts matters more than revealing them. Delete. One touch. 1 second. One decision. Everything disappeared from the screen. Or so they believed. But listen carefully, because this is where the story begins to reveal what cannot be seen. Words can vanish from a phone. They cannot vanish from the soul that wrote them. The message disappeared. The feelings remained. The silence returned. The questions grew louder. And somewhere, without fully understanding why, you may have felt an emptiness you could never quite explain. Not because you knew what had happened, but because hearts sometimes recognize what minds never witness. There are connections that move quietly beneath ordinary life. Not to control. Not to predict. But to remind us that compassion, honesty, and hope leave traces that cannot always be measured. Even when unseen. Even when unanswered. Even when deleted. If you have stayed this far, do not leave just yet. Because what vanished from that screen was only the beginning. What those deleted words actually said. Why they could not bring themselves to send them. And the astonishing reason heaven allowed that unfinished message to remain remembered when everything else seemed forgotten. That has not yet been revealed. The silence that followed was unlike any silence they had known before. It did not bring relief. It did not erase the emotions that had poured into every sentence. Instead, it became heavier with every passing hour, as though the words they had deleted refused to leave. They lingered quietly within their heart, returning at unexpected moments, asking the same question again and again. What if I should have sent it? That single question became a companion they could not escape. While everyone around them believed life was moving forward as usual, another story was unfolding beneath the surface. Every ordinary day carried extraordinary thoughts that no one else could see. Sometimes they would unlock their phone, stare at your name for only a second, and lock it again. Sometimes they would begin writing another message. This one was shorter. Then they erased it. Another night they tried again. This one sounded stronger. They erased that one too. They told themselves they were protecting both of you from disappointment. Yet deep inside, they knew the truth was far more complicated. It was never the words that frightened them. It was the possibility that those words might change everything. My beloved child, there are moments when people mistake fear for wisdom. They convince themselves that silence is the safest path simply because it asks nothing of them. But silence often carries its own burden, a burden that grows heavier each day it remains unspoken. Have you ever noticed how certain memories arrive without invitation? A familiar place. A passing fragrance. A melody heard only for a few seconds. Suddenly an entire chapter of the heart awakens. That is exactly what began happening. No matter how determined they were to move forward, reminders appeared in the smallest moments. A sunrise reminded them of a conversation. A quiet evening reminded them of your laughter. Even ordinary routines began carrying extraordinary memories. The more they tried to forget, the more clearly they remembered. Not because they were trapped in the past. Because some connections leave an imprint that cannot simply be dismissed. Every time they whispered to themselves, "It's over," another quiet reminder appeared. Every time they said, "I should let go," another memory returned. It seemed almost impossible to explain. Yet within this story, heaven had not forgotten what human hearts were still trying to understand. There are seasons when nothing appears to be happening, even though unseen changes are taking place every single day. Roots grow in silence before branches ever reach toward the sky. Healing often begins long before anyone notices its results. The same was true here. While they believed they were standing still, their heart was slowly becoming more honest than it had ever been before. Not through dramatic events. Not through sudden miracles. But through countless quiet moments that slowly removed every excuse they had hidden behind. They began realizing something unexpected. Deleting the message had not protected them. It had only postponed a decision they would eventually have to face. Truth has a remarkable way of returning. You can delay it. You can avoid it. You can bury it beneath distractions. But genuine honesty patiently waits until the heart is ready to receive it. That realization became impossible to ignore. One evening, they opened the empty conversation once again. Nothing new had appeared. No message from you. No unexpected notification. Only silence. Yet that silence spoke louder than words ever could. They stared at the blank screen for what felt like forever. Then they whispered softly, almost afraid to hear themselves. "I wish they knew." 4 simple words. 4 words no one else heard. Yet within this story, heaven heard every one of them. Sometimes people believe they are completely alone when speaking from the deepest places of their hearts. They are not. Every sincere hope. Every quiet prayer. Every honest tear. Every unspoken longing. None of it disappears unnoticed. The heart speaks a language that cannot always be measured by human understanding. As the night continued, another unexpected thought entered their mind. What if they felt this too? It was only a question. Yet it changed everything. For the first time, they stopped thinking only about their own fears. They wondered about yours. Had you also questioned what became of unfinished conversations? Had you ever sensed that something meaningful remained unsaid? Had you ever felt there was more to the story than what appeared on the surface? Questions began replacing assumptions. Compassion slowly replaced fear. And when compassion enters a heart, courage is never far behind. But just when it seemed another message might finally be written, something completely unexpected happened. A memory returned. Not a painful one. A hopeful one. It was so gentle that it almost felt forgotten. They remembered a moment when everything between you seemed effortless. No pretending. No overthinking. No fear. Just honesty. For a brief moment, they smiled. Not because every answer had arrived, but because they realized something precious had never truly disappeared. Hope. Hope had been quiet. Hope had been hidden. Hope had been waiting. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was beginning to speak once more. Yet the greatest revelation had not arrived. Because somewhere beyond everything they could see, someone was preparing to uncover the truth hidden inside that deleted message. Not through technology. Not by recovering lost words. But by understanding the feelings that gave those words life. And when that understanding finally comes, nothing either heart believed about the past will remain exactly the same. The moment of revelation is drawing closer. But it has not arrived, yet. A new morning arrived, yet nothing inside them felt entirely new. The world outside moved with its familiar rhythm. Cars passed. Conversations filled the air. People smiled, hurried, laughed, and continued with their lives. But beneath that ordinary rhythm, another story was quietly unfolding, a story that no one could see simply by looking. They had deleted the message. Yet the message had not released them. Every sentence they had erased seemed to echo more clearly than before. It was as if the heart refused to accept what the hand had done. My beloved child, there are moments when people believe they have ended a chapter, only to discover they have merely paused it. What is written with sincerity leaves a mark that time alone cannot remove. Days became weeks. Still, something remarkable continued happening. Whenever they sincerely tried to convince themselves they no longer cared, your name would appear in the most unexpected places. A familiar phrase spoken by a stranger. An old photograph discovered while searching for something else. A song they had not heard in years. None of these moments proved anything on their own. Yet together they formed a quiet pattern that was becoming impossible to ignore. They began asking themselves questions they had avoided for far too long. What if deleting that message was the greatest mistake I ever made? The question lingered. No answer arrived. Only silence. But sometimes silence is not empty. Sometimes it is preparing the heart to hear what it was never ready to hear before. They started noticing how often fear had spoken on their behalf. Fear had chosen their silence. Fear had delayed their honesty. Fear had disguised itself as caution until they could barely tell the difference. And once they recognized that truth, something inside them shifted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Quietly. Like the first light of dawn entering a room that had been dark throughout the night. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking, "What if I get hurt?" Instead, another question appeared. What if honesty is worth the risk? That single thought carried more courage than they realized. Heaven often begins transforming a heart long before the person notices the change themselves. Growth is rarely loud. It happens through countless invisible decisions. The decision to stop pretending. The decision to stop running. The decision to become truthful, even when certainty is nowhere to be found. Those quiet decisions were now taking root. Meanwhile, something equally unexpected was unfolding on your side of this story. You knew nothing about the deleted message. You never saw the words. You never watched them hesitate. You never witnessed the moment their thumb moved away from the send button. Yet there were evenings when an unexplained feeling settled over your heart. Not sadness. Not joy. Just the quiet sense that something unfinished still existed somewhere beyond your understanding. Within this fictional story, heaven was gently reminding both hearts that not every meaningful connection is measured by visible conversations. Sometimes what shapes us most are the words that were almost spoken. The apologies almost given. The hopes almost shared. The love almost confessed. Those unfinished moments become invitations, not to live in regret, but to become brave enough to choose differently when another opportunity arrives. Without realizing it, they began writing again. Not to send. Not yet. Just to understand themselves. Page after page filled with thoughts they had never spoken aloud. Some pages contained gratitude. Some contained questions. Some simply carried your name written quietly across the top before the page continued. As they wrote, they discovered something astonishing. The message they had deleted was never really about asking for an answer. It was about finally telling the truth. That realization changed everything. Truth does not lose its value because someone refuses to hear it. Truth remains valuable because it frees the one who speaks it. Slowly, the weight they had carried began changing. It was no longer the weight of fear. It became the weight of unfinished honesty. And unfinished honesty always longs to become complete. Then came an evening unlike the others. The sky seemed unusually calm. The air felt strangely still. They opened the same conversation once more. Their heartbeat was steady. No rushing. No panic. Only quiet determination. They looked at the empty space where that first message had once existed. Instead of feeling regret, they whispered something they had never dared to say before. If another chance comes, I won't hide. Those words were not spoken to anyone nearby. They were spoken to their own heart. And sometimes that is where the greatest promises begin. My beloved child, remember this as the story continues. Courage is rarely born in front of crowds. It is born in quiet moments when no one is watching. It is born when a person chooses truth before they know the outcome. It is born when hope quietly becomes stronger than fear. Yet even after making that promise, one mystery remained hidden. There was one sentence inside the deleted message they had never shown anyone. One sentence that carried everything they had been trying to protect. One sentence so honest that writing it had brought tears to their eyes before they erased it forever. They believed no one would ever know those words. They believed they would disappear with a single tap. But heaven had witnessed every letter. And in the next chapter of this story, the meaning behind that forgotten sentence will begin to unfold in a way neither heart could have imagined. The message may have vanished from the screen, but its deepest truth is only now beginning to awaken.